Happy Monday, everyone. This is Martha with Nature Niche. And this week, I bring you the third installment in my series for National Bird Feeding Month, talking about native plants to feed our wild birds. So often we think about feeding our fruit eaters like bluebirds and orioles with traditional feeders, but as I was sitting and watching my bluebirds this weekend, doing the Great Backyard Bird Count, um, I wanted to help you think about spring, summer, and fall, some of the other bird species that you might want to attract and support by offering natural fruit resources with native plants. So last week we talked about finches, goldfinches, and other seed eaters, and native plants to support them. Um, so this week I want to focus on the birds that really eat a lot of fruit. So many different types of birds either eat fruit as the majority of their diet, and they're known as frugivores, or they adjust their diet seasonally, eating more fruit when it's more readily available in the summer and the fall. Um, Fruit offers carbohydrates, fat, and protein for energy, as well as antioxidants that inhibit the production of free radicals that damage cells during stressful conditions or events like spring and fall migration and tough winter weather and storms. These species that eat fruit also often are insectivorous, meaning they eat insects as an important part of their diet as well. Um, and so offering native plants that support the native insects that they've evolved with to help support these species, that's very important as well. So birds that regularly eat fruit include thrushes like eastern bluebird, robins like this American robin. Thank you, Stan Lilley, for these really cute robin photos. I just want to point out that both of these photos actually show the robin eating what I believe is common buckthorn, which is an invasive species. So I'm hoping with this post to introduce you to some lovely native plants that we can, work on doing invasive species control and getting some better native plant material available for our wild birds. Other fruit eaters include the mimic thrushes like catbirds and mockingbirds, as well as grosbeaks, tanagers, thrashers, waxwings, many of our woodpecker species, as well as American crows, our jays, grackles, and magpies. And let's not forget the very popular Oriole species as well. So species that occasionally eat fruit include our tufted titmice, warblers, towhees, kinglets, quail, many of our sparrow species, and vireos as well. So the pie chart I showed earlier was from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's Handbook of Bird Biology, and that was showing the different, relative components of carbohydrates versus fat versus protein in different species. And bird species as individuals, their physiology limits which fruits a particular species can easily digest. So species have preferences based on which fruits their gut enzymes can best handle, and their energy and nutrient needs at a given time of year. So to me, this means that we need to offer a diversity of plant species that fruit as early in the spring to as late in the fall as we can manage and have fruit that persists through the winter months. Um, and do this to support as many of our bird species as possible. So, for more information about persistent winter fruit for wildlife, check out Monday with Martha number 138. And this figure is one that I pulled together with my friend Jeannie Henderson. Um, it is based on research out of the Northeast by Susan Smith and Scott McWilliams. So I'll put a link to this in the description for this post under the resources. But I wanted to share this because it helps prioritize. This is just focusing on native shrubs that provide fruit for migratory birds, but it helps you see all the different species that are preferred by songbirds, and will give you a place to get started. So similar to last week, I'd like to run you through native species, starting with herbaceous ground cover species and working our way up through shrubs, vines, and trees to help support our fruit-eating birds. So I'm back at the Audubon Native Plants database. Again, their search function is focused on zip code, and I again this week found that a little limiting. I really wish I could search more at the state level, so I'm using a Kalamazoo, Michigan zip code just to try to help pick up some of the more southern species. When I put in my Midland zip code, it really left a lot of plants out. So, and as far as filters go, let's start with annuals or perennials, try to get some idea for ground cover species. I selected fruit, but I was noticing a lot of the species we talked about for the seed eaters that have like dry seed or nuts were also showing up with this search. So it's not a perfect filter, but it'll get us there. And then I was playing around with checking different fruit eating groups of birds. Noticed that it didn't really matter. So you can play around with this, but I did want to show a couple of species that came up. Wild strawberry, Fragaria virginiana, a very flexible, spreading ground cover species that can take a lot of sun to shade and wet to dry conditions. So I wanted to mention that species since it does come up on the Audubon website. And then American pokeweed, Phytolacca americana. And so this is a species, you're not going to find it in the nursery trade. It is toxic to humans and other mammals. It also, if you bushwhack through it, stains your clothes pretty badly. So this is more of species for wild borders. I wouldn't have it in a backyard where you have small children who might eat the berries, or pets that might chew on the different plant parts. But something certainly you might want to try to leave in more natural areas of the landscapes that you manage. And another species that the database brought up for ground cover that has a fleshy covering over the seeds is jack in the pulpit. So Erisema triphyllum. So there's a nice woodland or part shade plant that is fairly readily available in the native plant nursery trade to consider adding to your landscape. And then the rest are mostly the seed species that we discussed last week. So I had to dig a little harder to come up with some other ground cover species for our fruit eaters. So as part of my extra effort and looking at multiple resources and just sort of racking my brain for the herbaceous plants that I'll carry in native plant sales or that I've seen elsewhere, I am using Illinois wildflowers. So if you've never used this website, it's great for us in the Midwest. There's a lot of species overlap between Michigan and Illinois. And a species you might consider is false Solomon seal, Smilacina racemosa, or it's now been reclassified in the genus Myanthemum racemosum. So the false Solomon seals do have nice fleshy fruit. And what I love about Illinois Wildflowers website is that it has this faunal association. So if I am wondering about the value of a particular plant, I like to come in here and kind of see what they say about that. So here you can see that fruit is eaten by woodland birds, things like ruffed grouse and veery. Another is starry false Solomon seal, Myanthemum stellatum, and this has similar but striped fruit and is also great for our woodland songbirds, including thrushes and veery. Similarly, our true Solomon seals in the genus Polygonatum are great ones to consider, great for woodland and shade gardens. They also have fleshy fruit that the ruffed grouse, various thrushes, other woodland birds, and veery enjoy as well. You can also consider plants in the genus Actaea. This is doll's eyes or white baneberry is a common name. We also have a native red baneberry. And another woodland kind of shade garden species that has very interesting fruit and can help feed our bird species like ruffed grouse, yellow-bellied sapsuckers, and American robins. This is another one of those species that the foliage and fruit are toxic to mammals, so might be better for naturalized areas and not where you have children or pets in the vicinity. Blue cohosh is another herbaceous species, Caulophyllum thalictroides, another woodland shade garden species with nice fleshy fruit, and this will help support your woodland birds as well. This species is another toxic one, and so the upside is that it tends not to be eaten by white-tailed deer and other mammalian herbivores like rabbits, but again, probably not the most appropriate in yards with children and pets. I wanted to mention one more mildly dangerous, or at least pokey one, eastern prickly pear. So we do have cactus native to Michigan, and the fruit, the fleshy fruit of this species is enjoyed by wild turkey, and it can provide nesting habitat for bobwhite quail. So another fun herbaceous one that you could consider in appropriate landscapes. Okay, jumping back to the Audubon Native Plant Database and looking at shrubs and vines, so some smaller statured woody plants. Again, looking at fruit. They have some great species showcased here. We have several species in the genus Amelanchier that flower very early and provide late spring, early summer fruit for many of our birds. You'll find that there are many species of dogwood in the genus Cornus that are native to Michigan and the Midwest that just offer really great fruit resources in the summer for our birds. There are a number of species in the genus Prunus, including American plum, which can be a large shrub or a small tree. I'm going to hop around a little bit here. Aronia melanocarpa, black chokeberry, a species of acidic soils that you could consider using. So many species that are native in the genus Rubus. So that covers our red raspberry, our wild red raspberry, our black raspberry, blackberries, and dewberries. So there are a lot of great species of rubus that you could consider either conserving. A lot of times the birds will plant this one for you. Um, or you might be able to take cuttings or find it in the nursery trade as well. And same goes for cherries. So this is Prunus virginiana choke cherry. That's one that you can find in the nursery trade. If you keep your eyes peeled, learn to identify your woody plants, this might be one that you just save, maybe transplant if it's growing where you don't want it to be, but the birds very likely may plant this for you. Um, and then some of these are showing up. I consider them more tree species, so we'll hold off on those for a second. What else? It mentions common snowberry in the so that's Symphoricarpus albus. And I just wanted to highlight this is one where you want a certain variety. Variety albus, there is a very commonly cultivated variety Ley Vegatus, which is native to the Pacific Northwest. And I believe that one has larger fruit. So make sure you're looking at the source if you're trying to add this species to your landscape. Make sure you're getting the native variety. Common winterberry, also known as Michigan holly, is a great species. Ilex verticillata, that's one of those ones that has nice persistent winter fruit. And then again, you have to take this database with a grain of salt and kind of research these species further. This has Euonymus atropurpureus, eastern wahoo, which is a great native river floodplain shrub. You're going to be hard pressed, I think, to find this in the native plant nursery trade. It is special concern in the state of Michigan. So maybe that's one that you go out of your way to manage invasive species and conserve on a river floodplain landscape, but one that might be a little more difficult to secure for planting in your own yard. Fragrant sumac, Rhus aromatica, a really great short, dry, hot species. Also with like later fruit providing resources that are somewhat persistent into the winter. Here's another dogwood species that I think is very underrated. Gray dogwood. You'll find it under Cornus femida more these days, that name. But beautiful fall foliage, white fruit, and just a great massing shrub that I think is underappreciated. Another nice dry hot site cherry, Prunus pumila, sand cherry. And let's not forget the things in the genus Vaccinium. So that includes our blueberries and cranberries. An example is highbush blueberry, Vaccinium corymbosum. Vaccinium angustifolium, low sweet blueberry, is another great one for various sites. This one is not native to the state, so I'm not sure why that's in there. But here's the low bush blueberry that I was mentioning. Viburnum acerifolium, maple leaf viburnum, is a great, this is another one that has dark fruit that is persistent into the winter and can take some shade, so dry shade too, which is a tough site condition. Viburnum lentago, nannyberry, is a large shrub or a small tree. Another great resource. Lindera benzoin, spicebush, is one that comes up in the research as very important to our migratory birds, can take shade, can take wet feet. So that's an excellent one to consider. Bearberry, Arctostaphylos uva ursi, is a fun little ground cover shrub that you might consider adding. And then definitely another important migratory or summer fruiting species is or things in the genus Sambucus. So Sambucus racemosa or pubens, I think that one's under that Latin name as well, and Sambucus canadensis. Another dogwood species, Corniceraceae, red osier dogwood. This one has a wide range of sun to shade and wet to dry tolerances, so a great species to consider. Here are additional sumac species, smooth sumac, Rus glabra, and staghorn sumac, Rus tivina. Also really great persistent fruits that serve as emergency resources for our birds that stick with us year round, and great resource for them during the winter. A nice native vine, Virginia creeper, Parthenocissus quinquefolia, with this lovely red fall foliage that the birds also love the fruit. And another shrubby sumac, winged sumac, Rus copalina. And then taking a deeper dive, looking at other resources, I'm using Cornell Lab of Ornithology's All About Birds. I thought I'd just check a few other species, see what we might have missed by using the Audubon database there. So pulling up pileated or pileated, depending on how you like to say it, woodpecker, checking under the life history notes, and the food. You can see that they like, so here's one they missed, greenbrier, which are vines and some herbaceous plants in the smilax genus. There's a dwarf hackberry, which is a very nice shrub. Sassafras, which I think will come up under trees, but you can see the blackberry, sumac, poison ivy. So not one you want to leave in your yard where you and your pets are moving through, but a fine thing to leave out in the woods in natural areas that provide good fruit for the birds to eat. Holly, so the genus Ilex that we talked about, dogwoods, persimmon, a more southerly species, and then elderberry species in the genus Sambucus that I showed you. So I also thought of wild grapes in the genus Vitis, and wintergreen and black huckleberry, which are shorter shrubs in the same family as blueberries and cranberries. Prickly ash is something you could consider planting. Bayberry. So prickly ash is Xanthoxylum americanum. Bayberry is Myrica pennsylvanica. We have many native roses, and birds like rose hips. And then the dwarf hackberry that's mentioned here, Celtis tenuifolia. And last but certainly not least, our native tree species, filtering on that. These offer fruit as well as often very helpful nesting sites for these fruit-eating birds. So I'm going to skip around a little bit. Here's Sassafras albidum that I mentioned as a fleshy fruit tree option. There are a lot of things that are really more of shrubs on this page. Eastern red cedar, Juniperus virginiana. These are technically cones, but they are fleshy, and the birds do really enjoy them. Flowering dogwood, Cornus florida, so a dogwood species that often takes a tree form. And then Black cherry we haven't talked about, so Prunus serotina. This is another one that the birds may plant for you. So learn how to recognize this species. You might be able to keep it or transplant it. But is a great, I've had Baltimore Orioles nesting in that tree species. Another lovely one, Black Tupelo, or black gum is another common name. Nyssa sylvatica is a great species to consider, really pretty fall color. There are many, many hawthorn species, I think over 50, native to Michigan. So in the genus Crataegus, this is Cruscali, the cockspur hawthorn, but they provide great fruit that persists into the winter months. Northern or common hackberry, Celtis occidentalis, is a great tree species to support our fruit-eating birds. Downy serviceberry, Amelanchier arborea, again, early flowering, early fruiting. Let's see if there are any others we haven't talked about that have fleshy fruit. Again, the American plum, we talked about that one. So, other things that I think are really helpful to our fruit-eating birds. Mulberries, just make sure you're not planting or keeping white mulberry. Morus alba, that is invasive, but Morus rubra, that's a state-threatened tree species. Definitely worth conserving. Protected by state law, but a great one that the birds love. Wild crab apples. We do have a native crabapple species in the genus Mollis. Mountain ash in the genus Sorbus. Might be a little bit harder to come by, but for example, showy mountain ash, Sorbus decora, might be one you consider. Certainly magnolia species, especially south of us, have nice fleshy fruit. And pawpaw is one that wasn't mentioned, but a nice small tree with great huge fleshy fruit. So those are the ones I can think of. I appreciate you hanging in there with me. That was, again, a lot of native species. Important to mention many of the woody species. I showed you Herbaceous, which means or translates to two houses. So they have individual plants with all male or all female flowers. And to have good fruit production, you're really going to want to plant or conserve these species in multiples. So that includes Michigan holly, bayberry, black gum, eastern red cedar, the sumac, spicebush, and sassafras, and pawpaw is not self-pollinating. So to help support our fruit-eating birds, it's definitely great to plant multiple individuals of these native plant species. So I hope that helps get you started as you try to support this group of our wild birds. And I wish you well on the last day of the Great Backyard Bird Count. Take care and have a good week.